Hey, hey! Thank you so much for sticking with this biology series. Today is a biological diversity kind of day. So I feel like we should learn about this and then go outside today and enjoy some nature. So save the earth and science rocks.
All right, open up your biology Google Drive or Spiral Notebook and let's get to it. So, copy down these 26 vocab words. Remember, they go in ABC order like this. And just come back later and create your own definitions of these words. Like always, remember to use your own words so that they make sense later and draw pictures if that helps. So, you can pause this if you need to finish writing down the terms. Biodiversity and disturbances. So, some ecosystems are more stable than others, right? So, stable ecosystems are often able to maintain a state of balance due to this high level of biodiversity. The biodiversity of an ecosystem is the variation or differences among living organisms, plants, animals, everything within that ecosystem. So, this includes genetic variation among members of the same species, as well as the variety of different species within that ecosystem. The rainforest has a very high level of biodiversity. Okay, and there can be disturbances such as habitat destruction that occurs when land is cleared, and it can cause a decrease in the biodiversity of an ecosystem. So, not cool. And changes often occur in ecosystems over time. Several causes of ecosystem disruption would be human activity, invasive species, changes in climate, and natural disasters. So let's talk more about each one of these. Human activities can upset the balance in an ecosystem. This farm is situated on the edge of the river where chemical fertilizers can easily enter aquatic systems through surface runoff. Not cool. This picture shows the destruction of a section of an Amazon rainforest to create farmland. Okay. And hunting and fishing. All right. Humans hunt to obtain food or for recreation. So, if done responsibly, hunting can cause minimal harm to an environment. In some areas, hunting can even help control the size of certain animal populations. However, there are many examples in human history of hunting a species to the point of endangerment or extinction. Not cool. Same with fishing. Okay, and then we have energy production. Human activities can produce wastes that are released directly into air when fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas are burned to generate electricity or power vehicles. Air pollution can negatively affect the health of plants and animals in an ecosystem. All right. Human activities also can produce wastes. Sometimes these wastes can be reused or recycled, and other times they are deposited into the land, air, or even water. Not cool. Ecosystems can also change as a result of an invasive species, okay? An invasive species is an organism that is introduced to a completely new environment, often through human activity. So, the invading species may thrive in this new area, which results in competition for food, water, space, resources that were once used by the native organisms, the plants and animals that lived there in a particular place for a very long time. Okay, when this happens, native organisms can become endangered or even go extinct because of this invasive species. So these vines have covered the native trees and bushes there so thickly that it's difficult to even see those trees underneath this invasive vine. All right, and in Australia, the European rabbit is an invasive species and it had no natural predators. So look at all these rabbits. Changes in climate. So, climate is the average weather conditions of a region, and it factors hugely in the makeup of an ecosystem and the characteristics of organisms that can live there. So, over its history, Earth has experienced dramatic shifts in global climate. Okay, and some of the causes of climate change are listed right here. These three things are what some people think. So, some think that the Earth's climatic cycle is influenced by equinox precession, all right, as pictured here. The Earth precesses or wobbles, right, on its axis. Okay, causing the degree to which it is tilted on its axis to vary. And this produces changes in the amount of solar radiation reaching different parts of the Earth's surface. So it influences the global climate. All right. During some parts of this cycle, Earth is cooler and experiences ice ages. And during other parts of the cycle, Earth experiences warming. And then we can talk about volcanic eruptions, right? When volcanoes erupt, they can spew gases and ash high into the atmosphere. So, this volcanic ash can take months to settle, and in the meantime, it can block significant amounts of sun's radiation, okay, which could influence global climate. All right, and we also have asteroid and meteorite impacts. Asteroid and large meteorite strikes can also block out sunlight by blasting fine dust particles into the atmosphere. So, in addition to asteroid and meteoroid impacts, other natural hazards have the potential to disrupt and alter ecosystems, okay? We have flooding, droughts and wildfires, tornadoes and hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, which we talked about, earthquakes, which here in Oklahoma we have learned about recently, landslide and mudslides, and tsunamis. A little bit about succession, or the natural development of a community until it reaches its climax community that is stable and in perfect harmony. All right. Primary succession, pictured up top, it takes a long time. All right. It occurs in areas which is barren or lifeless. Nothing has ever lived in there before. So the pioneer species first start to form starting with this lichen. Okay, until it finally reaches its climax community. It takes a long time. And then we have secondary succession down here. It takes less time because the area has been previously inhabited. All right, soil is usually present as this habitat was naturally or artificially disturbed. Maybe there was a forest fire. Okay, so there was previous organisms living there. So it takes a shorter amount of time to reach its climax community. All right, but primary succession or secondary succession, the ultimate goal of both is to reach its climax community where everything is stable and in perfect harmony. All right, make sure to watch these two videos sometime about human impacts on the environment and more about ecological succession. Practice question number 1. The graph here shows the number of wild mice living in a grassland ecosystem over a period of 3 years. All right, so we've got time on our x-axis. I know this. Remember, it goes on your x-axis, your independent variable. All right, so we've got time on our x, and then on our y-axis, we have the population of these wild mice in thousands. Okay, so this is in thousands, and that's on your y-axis, so that's the dependent variable, all right, the thing that we are measuring or seeing how it responds. Okay, so over time, this is how the population of wild mice responds. So, question, what is the most likely explanation for the change in a population that occurred at 1.5 years? So right here, what happened? The population drastically decreased and then it increased at year 2 and then leveled off again. Okay, so pause this, look at your answer choices, and let's see what you think. All right, so the most likely explanation for the change in wild mouse population is that a temporary event, okay, this was only temporary, it declined and then went back up, a temporary event such as, maybe a severe hurricane. All right, so let's look at a severe hurricane occurred, okay? Temporarily, these changes in the environment can decrease the populations of organisms that live there. Okay, and once the event has passed, populations usually return to their original size as long as a minimum number of individuals survive that event, that hurricane, and they're able to reproduce, okay, to reach their carrying capacity again. If you look at the other answer choices, you would not expect the graph to move back up to its carrying capacity. Okay, these answer choices, you wouldn't expect it to come back up. Number 2, the table here shows 7 species, A through G, and the percentage of genes they share with humans. All right, so this is genetic similarity of 7 species and the percentage of genes that they share with humans. So a researcher is building a computer simulation of an ecosystem. She plans to create various physical and biological disturbances in the ecosystem to see how populations change over time. She can only choose 3 of the species in the table to include in the simulation. Choosing which 3 species will probably result in the most resilient or stable ecosystem. Okay, so pause this, look at your choices, and see what you think. So, the most resilient or stable ecosystems are those with the most biodiversity, right? The most biodiversity. So, the greater the genetic diversity in an ecosystem, the greater the chance that at least some of the organisms will carry genes that will help them survive a physical or biological disturbance in the ecosystem that she was talking about, okay? The researcher should choose the 3 most diverse or genetically dissimilar species for her computer simulation. So, if species A shares 98% of its genes with humans, it must also share about 7% of its genes with species G. Okay? Therefore, species A and species G are the least related, okay, of all these species in the table. Okay, you've got the highest percentage to the lowest percentage. So they're the least related in this table. Species D, right here, species D, is as unrelated as possible to species G without being too related to species A. Okay, so it is also a good candidate for this computer simulation. So looking at all the choices, I would go through the table and it looks like that C would be our best choice. Number 3, biodiversity may be lost as a result of many different factors. So, catastrophic events such as deadly hurricanes, tornadoes, forest fires, or floods can decrease the biodiversity by killing a species or harming an ecosystem. Human activity can also cause a loss of biodiversity by displacing species from their natural habitat or killing organisms. All right, so what is a consequence of the loss of this biodiversity? Okay, so read these over, pause it, and see what you think. All right, so events such as catastrophes or human activities, they affect the biodiversity of that particular area, right? So the problem with loss in biodiversity is that the local, it's just that area, okay, the local disappearance of one species can have a negative impact on the overall species richness of that community. Okay, so, but let's just go through our answer choices and look at these. So let's look at A here. Loss of biodiversity always, okay, the word always is going to throw me off, always results in new species immigrating to the area, thus increasing overall species richness. But the loss of biodiversity does not always result in this. So that is kind of like a key way to mark that one off. And let's look at B. Populations will be able to better adapt to future changes. Once biodiversity is lost and genetic variations are reduced, okay, that's not going to help them adapt. So we'll cross off B. C is the one we were talking about. The local disappearance of one species can have, and I like that, can have a negative impact on the overall species richness of the community. Okay, so think of your food chain here, and if you lose one species, it can affect the other species in a community. And then lastly, let's just check out D. All catastrophic events in human activities clean up ecosystems? No, not all of them. Thus having a positive consequence, but that would be false. So for number 3, we are going to go with C. Number 4, an ecosystem includes all the living and non-living factors in a given area. That is, it includes all of the organisms like plants and animals that live in an area and the non-living environmental factors like water, soil, climate that affects the organisms. So, what is one criteria that must be met in order for an ecosystem to be stable? All right, so read through these and let's see what you think. So, stable ecosystems have relatively constant or predictable conditions, right? The population numbers of each organism must fluctuate at a predictable rate. The amount of available resources in an ecosystem must change at a predictable rate. And energy must flow through the ecosystem at a fairly constant rate over time. Okay, so let's look at our other choices and see what's going on here. If we look at A, there must be less energy flowing into the ecosystem than flows out. Okay, that's not necessarily true, so we're going to cross off A. If we look at B, the population size of every organism living in an ecosystem must increase over time. Okay, that's not true. It doesn't have to do that. And C, the different species of organisms within the ecosystem cannot interact with another. No, so hopefully it's D. The amount of available resources in an ecosystem must change at a predictable rate. Yes, so number 4 is going to be D. Number 5, if a disease killed all the frogs in this food web, which population would be most directly affected in a negative way? All right, would it be the hawks, the insects, the owls, or the mice? Okay, so pause it, think about it, and see what you come up with. All right, in this case, if frogs were killed from the disease, right? Frogs are most directly linked to insects, okay, and to the owls, right? They're most directly linked to the insects and to the owls. So, if a disease killed all the frogs in this food web, the owl population would be negatively affected since they would no longer be able to eat on the frogs, right? That's negative for the owl. The insect population, on the other hand, would be positively affected since they would no longer be eaten by the frogs. Okay, so the one that's directly affected negatively the most would be C, owls. Number 6, examine this food web below. What might happen to this food web if the ecosystem it represents experienced a serious climatic change that caused most of the ecosystem streams to dry up? Okay, A, the caterpillars would starve. Okay. B, the equilibrium of the ecosystem would remain the same. C, the bears would starve. Or D, the minnows would become overpopulated. Okay, so in the event that the climate of this ecosystem became more arid and many of the streams dried up, all of the organisms that relied on aquatic life for food would either starve, maybe be forced to migrate, or if possible, be forced to eat other organisms for a food source. All right, so in this food web, let's see, many of the terrestrial animals rely on both aquatic and other terrestrial animals for food. So while their populations would be affected, they do not have as great a chance of starving as a terrestrial population that relied solely on aquatic life for food, okay? Such as the population for the bears, okay? The bears solely rely on aquatic life for food. So we're going to go with C. Last one, number 7. How do ecosystems respond to natural disasters such as fires and floods? Okay, ecosystems are able to actually recover. They're able to recover from disasters. The overall recovery is slow, but it begins quickly and it occurs in stages. Okay, remember talking about succession. So after 50 to 100 years, most ecosystems return to a system similar to the original one. Remember, secondary succession. So out of all the choices, we're going to look at C. They recover in stages, okay, gradually returning to the original system, and hopefully that's its climax community. All right, after you fully cover the topic of biological diversity and ecosystem stability, you should be able to create a project or presentation or experiment explaining all of this. So, good luck and make your teacher proud.